With several marriages fail on TV for years, with each betrayal and breakdown depicted in a glamorous reality TV style. However, today's events weren't pre-planned. This was not a confessional interview where a producer might elicit sympathy or practice crying. The law was this, and Kody Brown and Robyn, his legal wife, had finally been apprehended by the law. The atmosphere in courtroom 3B was so dense that it was impossible to breathe. Meri sat stiffly at the plaintiff's table, her eyes darkened with insomnia, her hair perfectly groomed. Her jaw was so tightened that it felt like her teeth might break, and she wore a subdued blazer. With a stack of manila folders at her elbow, Janelle sat next to her, calmer, but just as worn out. The cadence of her fingers tapping the table revealed nervousness she would not normally display. Across the aisle, Robyn frantically wiped her eyes with a balled-up tissue while speaking to her lawyer in a childlike manner. Beneath her eyes, her mascara had already smudged into gentle crescents. With his shoulders straight and his hair untamed, Kody sat next to her, looking like a picture of boiling rage. Like a man about to blow up, he tapped his boot on the courtroom floor. The judge briskly entered and sat down, a silver-haired woman with a polished steel glare. The whispers in the gallery vanished in an instant. This matter had been simmering for months. People who had once pledged allegiance to the family had testified. Bank accounts had been subpoenaed, and property deeds had been examined. It was Judgment Day today. "Everyone stand up," the bailiff said. When they sat down again, the silence felt like a held breath, and the room stood. The judge started reading the decision. Her voice was impersonal and steady, more like the voice of the law than emotion. She mentioned assets that had been mysteriously transferred into Robyn's name, inconsistencies in the transfer of property titles, and unfulfilled promises made to Meri and Janelle. Years of financial records that demonstrated who had given and who had profited were highlighted by her. Then the blow came from her. They were to restore the deeds. Several land plots and other assets were returned to Meri and Janelle as their legitimate owners. Within 30 days, Kody and Robyn were to leave the Flagstaff estate, which was the focal point of their lives together. Robyn's accounts were going to stay frozen until the outstanding debts were examined. The words hung thick and devastatingly in the air. Robyn let out a cry like if she had been struck in the stomach. Her tissue could not contain the flood of tears that ran down her face as she sagged against the table and sobbed freely. Sitting quietly in the rear, her children appeared stunned, as if the earth had vanished beneath them. Kody got up quickly. He roared, "This is outrageous," as his voice reverberated off the walls of the courthouse. Simply said, "This is a witch hunt. We have been singled out due to our identity and lifestyle. Do you really believe you can ruin a family in this way? Do you believe you can take away what we have created?" The judge's gavel made a single decisive slam. Reporters, spectators, and longtime fans who had followed the Brown family story for years filled the Flagstaff courthouse. There was an almost electric excitement in the air as rumors circulated that Robyn Brown, Kody's favorite wife and former soulmate, may potentially lose everything. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Meri Brown sat peacefully on one side, her hands folded firmly in her lap, her posture rigid yet elegant. With a pile of meticulously prepared documents by her side, Janelle sat next to her, worn out yet unflinching. Kody and Robyn sat on the other end, their looks glum, their body language a mixture of desperation and haughtiness. It was like a thunderclap when the verdict was announced. The judge ruled that the property transfers that had previously been wrongfully transferred into Robyn's name had to be undone. Meri and Janelle would get the deeds back. Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel, TLC Flicks. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. In addition, Robyn and Kody have 30 days to leave the opulent Flagstaff mansion. Robyn's assets were placed on hold and long-hidden debts were exposed. Murmurs, gasps, and the desperate scratching of reporters' pens filled the courtroom. Kody's face was wild and crimson as he jumped up in rage. He yelled that the family had been deceived and that it was a witch hunt at the judge, the attorneys, and everybody else who would listen. However, security had to order him out because the verdict held. As though her body couldn't handle the wave of emotions rushing through her, Robyn stayed sitting, her hands shaking and tears streaming down her face. The cameras flashed like lightning as they left the courthouse. Robyn hid her face in her hands and sobbed loudly enough to be heard above the din of the crowd, while Kody yelled aggressively at the media in a harsh, broken voice. Meri and Janelle went out behind them, straining straighter than they had in years, but neither grinning nor gloating. It wasn't about retaliation for them. It was about getting back the fairness, safety, and dignity that had been taken away from them for too long. The ruling's reality set in 2 weeks later to deliver the formal eviction notice. Deputies showed up to the Flagstaff mansion, once Robyn's haven and a testament to her legal marriage to Kody. The expansive home was now a desolate and terrifying place. Robyn wailed in anguish as she slumped on the marble floor, and the children looked anxiously through the windows, their faces white. "This is unfair," her voice cracked and sounded rough as she sobbed. "I sacrificed all for this family. I tried to make things work. I made sacrifices. And now we're being thrown away like garbage?" Kody's wrath seemed to overtake him as he stormed around the home. He was furious over deception, smashed doors, and insulted the justice system. However, his outbursts lacked their former impact. He had lost his wives, his kids were no longer with him, his money was in ruins, and now Robyn was losing even the house that had made her feel invincible. As movers cleaned out the residence, boxes piled up on the driveway. The once proud mansion was now filled with shadows and echoes, a reminder of unfulfilled promises and favoritism that had cost too much. Kody struggled in vain to maintain the appearance of control as Robyn clutched to him and sobbed furiously. Meri and Janelle, meanwhile, had a subtle sense of validation. They had been subjected to abuse, neglect, and the persistent feeling that their sacrifices were merely supporting Robyn's comfort and Kody's ego for years. The equilibrium had changed now. They regained ownership of the properties that had been seized from them. In a sense, justice had been done at last. The story was widely covered by the media. Online tabloids and television screens blared headlines. "Robyn Brown is evicted. Meri and Janelle take back their property." After a court ruling, Kody Brown's empire is in ruins. Justice is celebrated by fans. Robyn's tears cannot save her. Once split on the Brown family, the public appeared to be heavily in favor of Meri and Janelle. For many, a house of cards that had been teetering for years finally fell apart. Robyn and Kody appeared hollowed out as they sat in their car outside the deserted mansion. Their kingdom was reduced to nothing. The doors were locked and the boxes were gone. Kody pounded the steering wheel and mumbled about conspiracy and treachery in a furious voice. He snarled, "They made everyone against me. The spouses, children, and even the network. Everything is put up. They wish for me to fail." Robyn's voice was hardly audible beyond a whisper as she leaned against the window, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Broken. No, Kody. This is what we did to ourselves." After that, the once famous sister-wives couple sat in silence as the truth of their demise weighed heavily on them. Robyn's tears did not alter the outcome. For the first time in years, Kody was left with no one to blame but himself. Tension was no new thing to the downtown Flagstaff courthouse. Its ancient sandstone walls had witnessed hundreds of conflicts, including divorces, land cases, and small-time frauds, but nothing like this. The courthouse plaza was alive on the morning of the decision. Reporters carried cameras on their shoulders. Boom mics hung over huddled groups of media personnel, and onlookers were in line, holding cell phones as if they could witness history in action. The Browns were their target. America had been watching its experiment with plural marriage, forcing it to reckon with issues of love, religion, and family for 4 seasons on TLC. In the morning, the verdict would force them to face the consequences of their actions. "Mr. Brown," she declared in a firm tone, "I will not put up with tantrums in my courtroom. You will be ejected if you do not sit down." However, Kody went on making frantic gestures with a crimson face and trembling curls. He spit out, "They're jealous," and gestured at Meri and Janelle with a quivering finger. "They've been envious all along. You're giving them everything now because they want to see us fail. I made sacrifices for this family, as did Robyn. You are destroying the life we have created." As security drew nearer, Kody finally sat with his eyes flaming with rage and his chest heaving. Meri gave herself one deep breath across the aisle. She had never smiled, but after years of being erased, a spark of vindication appeared in her eyes. As Janelle rearranged her papers, her hands trembled, but her lips were firmly pulled together in determination. They weren't here to boast. For the first time in years, they felt as though they could achieve the justice they had come for. The gallery exploded when the judge finally adjourned. As Kody and Robyn forced their way through the crowd, reporters hurried to the aisle to take pictures. Kody yelled at cameras in a raspy voice, accusing them of persecution, conspiracy, and betrayal. Robyn leaned heavily against him, scarcely able to stand, her sobbing echoing through the commotion like an animal's cries. Moments after, Meri and Janelle came out, the questions as incisive as ever, the flashbulbs as persistent. However, they walked silently, their faces calm. For them, there were no big speeches to give or sound bites to make. The decision was self-evident. Outside, the plaza was scorched by the Arizona sun. Supporters and protesters mixed together, with some brandishing handcrafted signs and others yelling in rage or screaming in agreement. Unable to bear the humiliation, Robyn fell into Kody's arms on the steps of the courthouse. His face was contorted with anger as he put his arms around her, his eyes flashing as if he was looking for someone to punish or blame. Meri and Janelle watched from afar, their hands gripped folders like shields, their bodies tense with emotion. They were not amused. They failed to wave. They just moved into their cars, waiting silence, stepping past the mayhem. This was freedom for them, not victory. Nevertheless, there was strength in that release. After decades of raging within the Brown family, the storm had finally exploded. Meri was almost dazzled by the Arizona light when she left the courthouse. As if she were a celebrity strolling the red carpet, passersby screamed her name. Cameras clicked frantically, and reporters flocked to the scene. However, Meri felt none of that on the inside. She seemed worn out, hollow, and yet calm. She didn't grin. The inquiries that were thrown at her from all sides went unanswered with her chin up in silent defiance. She moved firmly, her heels clicking against the pavement. She had been the ghost wife for so long, the one who was ignored, hushed, and pushed aside while her suffering was absorbed to allow Kody and Robyn to prosper. She felt seen today, for the first time in years. Meri released a deep breath she hadn't known she'd been holding as the car door shut behind her, drowning out the commotion outside. Her heart continued to rush even though the courthouse seemed so far away. She looked out the window and saw Robyn in the distance sobbing and collapsing against Kody's chest. in a sight that would undoubtedly make headlines for days. Meri didn't feel sorry for Robyn, but she also didn't gloat. She just observed, her thoughts thick with recollection, her face unreadable. Meri recalled Robyn's first day with the family. Kody had talked about soulmates and destiny back then. He had referred to Robyn as a gift from heaven, and Meri, desperate to win his approval and maintain her position, had consented to a formal divorce from Kody in order for Robyn to wed him and obtain benefits for her kids. Although it had been one of the most agonizing decisions of her life, she had convinced herself that it was honorable and that she was making the sacrifice for the benefit of the family. She forced a grin and signed the papers with trembling hands. However, what had transpired was unfair. There was no togetherness. It was the gradual decline in her value. Robyn had taken the position of legal wife and gained favor fast. As Meri vanished into the background, Kody's love for her grew closer to her like a spotlight. With every year that went by, her status in the family shrunk. Her interactions with Kody became fewer, and her home felt more empty. She had gone through the notorious catfishing scandal in which her loneliness was made public. With Robyn giving her pathetic looks that hurt more than outright brutality, and Kody ignoring her needs, she had suffered unending humiliation. Just because she wanted to be appreciated, she had to put up with being termed poisonous, theatrical, and selfish. And she had remained through it all. But Meri knew she had remained too long as she sat in the silent automobile with Janelle by her side. This is where she is now because of all the years she swallowed her pride, the night she cried by herself, and the time she told herself she didn't deserve more. The verdict had restored her dignity, which had been taken from her. It was heavy, but substantial, and she could feel it sinking into her chest like a stone. She felt rooted for the first time in years. The silence was broken by Janelle's forceful yet composed voice. "We did it." Startled, Meri turned to face her. Janelle was a woman who didn't mince words. She spoke with intention, and Meri could feel the weight of those 3 words in her bones. "Yes," Meri muttered. She swallowed hard as her throat constricted, fighting back the threatening tears. She didn't intend to cry. Not right now. Not in this moment of silent power. Not in front of Janelle. Not in front of cameras. She was trembling inside, though. Meri sat by herself in bed that night, her phone ringing nonstop with missed calls and texts. Reporters, supporters, and even distant relatives all wanted to hear her side of the story. The room fell silent as she placed the phone on the nightstand, face down. She kept thinking about Kody's face in the courtroom, how his anger had warped his features, how he had pointed at her as if she was the bad guy, and how his voice was brimming with contempt. She used to love that face more than anything else in the world. She had trusted that voice more than any other. It was the cornerstone of her life, and now there was only sound. Meri closed her eyes and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. She had felt helpless and that her life was something that happened to her rather than something she could control. That had changed today. She had concrete evidence from the court decision that she wasn't invisible, that her sacrifices weren't forgotten, and that the truth could finally be accepted. Not to Robyn, not to Kody, not even to herself, but to the world, she muttered into the night. I was important. The internet was ablaze with headlines the following morning. Images of Robyn crying, Kody yelling, and Meri and Janelle leaving together. Fans flocked to social media with words of encouragement, and talk shows were ablaze with commentary. Some called it karma. Some called it justice. Some merely celebrated the fact that women who had been marginalized for so long were now regaining something. Meri didn't read it. As she sat at the window and watched the Arizona sky change from pale pink to brilliant blue, she made herself a cup of coffee. For the first time in years, she felt that she had a future ahead of her, one that she could shape for herself, rather than one that was determined by Robyn's tears or what Kody wanted. She did not feel triumph. It was not retaliation. It was freedom. Janelle had always been the practical one. Janelle had talked about finances, timetables, and long-term goals, while the other women had often talked about feelings, envy, and the need for time and space. She had been a stabilizing force in the chaos of multiple marriages, ensuring that children were fed, bills were paid, and dreams of owning land in Coyote Pass remained more than just illusions. However, she had ended up with nothing, even though she was the one who kept the financial structure together. Janelle could not cry when the courtroom announced the verdict. She did not scream, flinch, or even make any noise with her breathing. She just let the words. She had persisted even after Kody laughed at her insistence on spreadsheets. She was aware that those documents might be important someday. She now discovered that her persistence had saved her as she looked through fading documents, bank accounts, and faded invoices. Her kids had grown up witnessing her waste every penny. She recalled tired but determined evenings spent at the kitchen table after work, planning how to save money for braces, soccer outfits, and the countless costs associated with raising 6 kids, all while paying the utilities. She had seen Robyn struggle to make ends meet as Kody lavished money on her fantasies. The mansion, the limitless spending, the resource-defining internet store, all the while telling her to wait her turn. It was never her turn. Rather, she had seen her sacrifices pass unnoticed, her labor and sweat being used to construct the exact structure Robyn now claimed as her throne. Janelle called Madison, her oldest daughter. The day following the decision, although she spoke steadily, Madison's response, "Mom, I heard the news. Are you okay?" Janelle felt something break inside. She tried to remain calm, but her voice was shaking as she said, "I'm more than okay. I feel seen at last." There was a pause before Madison's tearful voice could be heard on the other end. "Mom, you deserve this. You've always been worthy of more than what he provided." Janelle closed her eyes and allowed her daughter's words to soothe her. She had harbored an unsaid dread for years that her kids would blame her for staying and exposing them to a family dynamic that frequently made them feel inferior. She hadn't realized she needed the kind of healing that came from hearing Madison's proud, non-judgmental voice. Years ago, when Kody Pass was merely a pipe dream, Janelle reflected with broad, passionate movements. She could imagine Kody standing in the dust, promising expansive homes and a cohesive family complex. She recalled the glimmer of optimism and the assurance that her perseverance and diligence will be rewarded. She had put money, her own money, her credit, her sacrifice into that land. Additionally, it felt like it was erased when the titles changed to Robyn's name. Although Kody had assured her that it was just temporary and for the good of the family, she had a gut feeling that it wasn't. She had been correct. Her ownership was now reinstated as the court had decided. Validation was more important than property alone. It was evidence that her years of effort and sacrifice had not gone unnoticed, and that she had not been stupid. But Janelle was not a boasting lady. She was aware of Robyn's pain. She had witnessed her crying, devastated and humiliated in the courtroom. Janelle couldn't forget the nights she stayed up wondering how she was going to pay for Robyn's mansion. Even though she wanted to feel sorry for her, there were limits to sympathy. Janelle's thoughts of Kody now were filled with nothing but a profound, hollow emptiness. In the past, She had truly and profoundly loved him. She had supported him when others attacked him, trusted his vision, and believed in his leadership. But as she stood there in that courtroom, seeing him scream like an animal trapped in a corner, she realized too well that Kody was not a man of vision. He was an egotistical man. He had exchanged Robyn's emotions for her devotion, Robyn's drama for her pragmaticism, and Robyn's steady hand for her shaking one. Janelle came to the realization that he was solely responsible for the collapse of the empire he had established. She stood in her tiny patio that night, the cool, dry desert air feeling cool against her skin. As the sun dropped below the mountains, the horizon was illuminated by the final orange striations. She listened to the silence while closing her eyes. Her life had been filled with noise for years. Robyn sobbing, Kody's loud voice, kids fighting, cameras recording, and producers prodding. There was silence now, and Janelle found serenity in that quiet. As if talking to herself, she muttered to the barren sky, "I am able to rebuild for me this time." News outlets aired images of Robyn collapsing, Meri and Janelle leaving together, and Kody yelling the following day. Talk programs analyzed every gesture and facial expression. Commentary flooded social media, with detractors ridiculing Kody's outburst and fans applauding Janelle for her tenacity. Janelle did not observe. She opened her calendar, made her morning tea, and started drawing the new life. A life that was exclusively hers, free from Robyn's insatiable yearning and Kody's hollow promises. Her future seemed like her own for the first time in decades, and it was sufficient. That morning, the Flagstaff courthouse was completely crowded. As the judge got ready to read the final verdict, reporters, spectators, and even distant relatives of the Brown family crowded the benches and whispered anxiously. The trial had been a media circus for weeks. The public's perception of the once famous polygamous family had been almost ruined by Robyn's alleged financial maneuvers, Kody's heedless loyalty, and the proof Meri and Janelle had provided regarding covert property transfers. Robyn sat at the defendant's table, her hands shaking a little as she held a tissue, her face pallid, her makeup streaked from restless nights. She made an effort to look tough, but each time the double doors creaked open, her gaze darted anxiously towards them, clinging to the hope that Kody would yet come to her aid. However, the chair beside her was still vacant. With her lawyer at her side, Meri sat erect at the other table, her posture exuding a quiet strength. On Meri's side was Janelle, who was composed yet firm. After years of manipulation and polygamous dominance, their union felt unbreakable. After decades of being ignored, disregarded, and misled, both women were standing here in this courthouse as survivors and equals, recovering what had been taken from them. The gloomy quiet was broken by the judge's voice. He started by saying, "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs, Meri Brown and Janelle Brown, after reviewing the evidence, testimony, and financial records provided." Throughout the courtroom, there was a gasp. Reporters scrolled through notes right after, with others even hurrying outside to contact their editors. The judge went on. With immediate effect, the plaintiffs will legally regain ownership of the deeds to the Coyote Pass properties and the related bank accounts. In addition, Robyn Brown is given a 30-day notice period to leave the Flagstaff residence. Forcible eviction will occur if you don't cooperate. Robyn's mouth dropped open in shock. The room whirled around her. Her voice cracked as she murmured, "No, no, this can't be right." She shook her head angrily as her lawyer leaned in to try and soothe her. "I live there. That is my security. Kody assured me that it would be ours forever." For the first time since the start of the trial, Meri looked at Robyn. Her eyes were filled with a deep, determined anguish and justified indignation. Yet there was no gloating. "Robyn, you used our losses to build your future," Meri murmured softly. "Now the truth is out." Her voice steady, but laced with decades of suppressed pain. Janelle did not give Robyn a glance. Rather, she confirmed specifics on the time frame for ownership transfer in a whisper to her attorney. This wasn't about retaliation. For her, justice and survival were at stake. When the gavel struck, indicating the end of the case, reporters yelled questions. "Robyn, how would you react if you lost everything? Now that you've won, Meri Janelle, what are your next plans? Kody Brown, where are you today? What prevented him from being there to help his wife?" Robyn, however, hardly heard them. The outside world appeared to come crashing down in slow motion. She shielded her face as she stumbled out of the courtroom while cameras flashed. She was completely alone for the first time since she had joined the Brown household. Together, Meri and Janelle left, their shoulders grazing each other as though their newfound friendship had been cemented by fire. When they initially came onto the courtroom steps, they remained silent and allowed the intense Arizona sunlight to wash over them. Meri lifted a hand and firmly stated, "We've said what needed to be said in court," as the throng exploded in questions. Truth was at issue here, and truth has won out. A few steps away, Robyn turned to face them. Her hair stuck to her wet cheeks, mascara running, and realized that the horror was far from over. It was just getting started because she has nowhere to live now, no cash without her hubby at her side. And the lady she had previously written off as weak had just achieved greater success than she could have ever dreamed. Outside Robyn Brown's Flagstaff house, the February wind howled as the chilly morning broke. With clouds bloated by an impending storm, the sky was slate gray. Robyn had slept very little because she kept thinking about the courtroom scene, the judge's voice cutting through her frantic cries, the gavel striking, and the clinically cold words. The court rules in favor of Meri and Janelle Brown. Robyn had been hoping for answers and some indication that the horror wasn't over for days after that decision. She had persuaded herself that there would be a loophole, an appeal, or maybe Kody would show up out of nowhere with a big idea and burst through the door like the man she had thought him to be. But her brittle illusions were shattered that morning by the sound of hard knocking. Kody wasn't the one. A sheriff's deputy was involved. When Robyn saw the man standing on her porch with documents in hand and his badge gleaming in the dreary light, she froze. Before anyone said a word, her stomach dropped. She knew what that man carried wasn't friendly, since she had witnessed enough courtroom plays. The deputy stated firmly yet politely, "Mrs. Brown, this is an official notice. It is necessary for you to leave this property within 72 hours. You no longer own the house." The words were like punches to the body. Her knees almost gave out. "Take a vacation?" Her voice cracked as she whispered, "This is where I live, my kid's house. There must be an error, please." The deputy, however, had no space for compromise. After placing the envelope in her shaking hands and nodding sympathetically, he retreated into the chilly wind. For a few moments, Robyn stood motionless in the doorway, her heart thumping so hard that it seemed to reverberate through the deserted hallways. The paper felt like stone in her hands. She closed the door and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, pressing her back against it. Unaware of the impending court battle, her kids played upstairs. Their laughter echoed softly through the ceiling, a terrible contrast to the destruction inside her chest. She remembered Ariella's half-finished artwork stuck proudly to the refrigerator, Solomon's new Lego structure, and Aurora's secret poetry journal, which she had vowed never to touch. How was she going to approve them once more? How could she justify the loss of everything they owned, everything she had assured them would be safe? She quickly remembered the names of Meri and Janelle. Years ago, she had referred to them as sisters, shared meals with them, and pretended to smile at family gatherings. However, those women had spent years anticipating, observing, and preparing their comeback. She had been afraid of losing control, but now they had it. Stumbling into the living room, Robyn gazed at the pictures hanging on the mantel. Kody and her wedding portrait, images of family gatherings when she had demanded to be the center of attention, the dazzling representation of Kody's favorite wife. In order to ensure that she and her kids were protected first, she recalled all the evenings she had whispered in Kody's ear, urging him to safeguard their possessions. Those murmurs had now backfired. She didn't own the house. She didn't own the money. Kody had disappeared into his own guilt and resentment. So even he wasn't really hers anymore. Her fingers whitened as she grasped the eviction notice. Desperation and anger blended together, simultaneously bubbling hot and cold. Robyn realized for the first time how alone she was around her. The fortress she had constructed brick by brick with control, manipulation, and tears was crumbling. Worst of all, she had lost all of her supporters. Janelle and Meri weren't coming to her aid. Years ago, Christine had severed her relationship. Her presence had long been resented, even by the children of the other husbands. They would, if anything, rejoice in her failure. The once proud house echoed with the raw, guttural sound of Robyn sobbing while she buried her face in her hands as thunder roared in the background. 3 days. All she had left was that. Flagstaff would never see Robyn Brown the same way again as the door closed behind her. Robyn Brown was not comforted by the sunrise in Flagstaff this morning. The house she had once referred to as her forever house was half empty when she woke up, with boxes piled carelessly in the corners. Her dreams had been plagued by rumors about the court's ultimate decision for weeks. But today the rumors had vanished. It was fact. The front door was rocked by a strong knock about 8:30 a.m. Robyn stopped. She could tell who it was without looking through the peephole. The locksmith had arrived with the court-appointed officers. Her breath was irregular and shallow, and her hands were shaking as she gripped the counter's edge. One of the officers called, "Mrs. Brown?" He spoke in a formal yet definitive tone. "Now you have to go outside." Robyn's eyes filled with tears. She realized that screaming, arguing, and pleading for a little more time would just make her feel even more ashamed. The deadline had gone. The documents had been served, and Meri and Janelle's attorneys had promptly enforced the order. She opened the door, her steps trembling. The officers gave a courteous nod, but their expressions remained fixed. A locksmith unloaded his equipment behind them. For the life she had created, the clinking of metal sounded like a death bell. The neighbors peered out their windows, phones in hand, as Robyn stepped outdoors with one oversized duffel bag. She noticed that there were cameras in the area, possibly from paparazzi who had heard about the event as well as from locals. The embarrassment burned on her face. The formerly meticulously constructed portrayal of the devoted, kind wife, the one who saved the Brown family, was now destroyed and publicly shown. Meri and Janelle, meantime, were sitting together at their lawyers' offices across town. "She's not there." With a steady tone and the weight of years of betrayal, Janelle asked. The lawyer nodded slightly in satisfaction. "Yes, as of this morning, the locks are now different. You are the sole owner of the property titles. It's finished." With the tiniest hint of a smile on her lips, Meri reclined in her chair. Not long before Kody had gradually destroyed her position in the family, she had not experienced this sensation of control in years. The roles were reversed for the first time. Nevertheless, her heart was filled with an agonizing mixture of grief and vindication, rather than gloating. As she melted into the background, she recalled the innumerable evenings she had spent watching Robyn and Kody establish their kingdom. Now, with stark, agonizing clarity, she remembered the deception that had ruined her marriage, the weight of silence she had suffered, and the violation of her confidence. But retaliation wasn't the only thing at stake here. It was about getting back what was hers. When Robyn returned home, she watched in clouded vision as movers removed the rest of her possessions. She whispered vacuous assurances that she didn't believe herself while holding her smallest child close. "We'll be all right." Her voice cracked with each syllable, but she said, "Mommy will figure this out." In actuality, though, she had no idea where to go. Kody had become aloof, consumed by his own escalating humiliation and rage. His once booming voice now came out in sour mutters, accusing everyone of causing the collapse he refused to acknowledge he had caused, including Meri, Janelle, the courts, and even the kids. Robyn then stood on the pavement as the house's locks clicked shut behind her. She was no longer the family's queen or the preferred wife. Finally, she was what Meri and Janelle had foreseen: isolated, destitute, and powerless. She came to the realization for the first time that she could no longer play the victim, cry her way out, or charm her way back. The safety net has vanished, the empire was over, and standing in the wreckage was Robyn Brown. As Robyn sat slouched in the back of her rental car, the clear evening air in Flagstaff had a subtle hint of desert sage. Twilight has scarred the sky, the horizon turning gray and purple. The bright screen of her phone shone on her tear-streaked face as she gripped it in her hands like a lifeline. Since the eviction in the morning, she had made 6 calls to Kody. The calls were either unanswered or left on voicemail each time. Once more, her shaking fingers lingered over the dial. Her mind was spinning with all the worst-case scenarios, and her heart was thumping. Where had he gone? Was he gone? Was he now on Meri's and Janelle's side? Desperation finally prevailed over caution. After pressing the phone once again, she left a voicemail. "Kody, please, I have no idea what to do. The house was taken by them, the children, I'm not even sure where to begin. You are necessary to me. I need us." She felt the weight of her own futility as she heard the final beep. The ensuing hush was deafening. She repeatedly played the message, hoping he would call her back, listen to her stress, and reassure her that she was still his favorite and his favorite. However, the call never arrived. Kody, meanwhile, was pacing the mansion he had left weeks before. Or, more accurately, the mansion that he had thought would always belong to him and Robyn, now deserted save for the sounds of old arguments. Robyn's stuff was taken away from her by the court, but Kody's pride was taken away even more. He had to stop acting like he was in charge. He was a man of consequence postponed, not a guy of power. In an attempt to calm the maelstrom of guilt and rage he was feeling, he poured a glass of whiskey and took a long sip. Robyn's desperate texts were constantly flashing on the screen of his phone, which was resting on the table. He didn't respond. In his side, every ping felt like a needle. He hated the noise. The truth he hated. Above all, he hated the fact that he had allowed this to occur. Robyn dialed again, oblivious to the coldness on the other end. When she eventually got to him, all she could hear was a long, tense silence, followed by the distant, flat sound of Kody's voice. "Kody, please, I have no idea what to do. The house was taken by them, the children, I'm not even sure where to begin. You are necessary to me. I need us." She felt the weight of her own futility as she heard the final beep. The ensuing hush was deafening. She repeatedly played the message, hoping he would call her back, listen to her stress, and reassure her that she was still his favorite and his favorite. However, the call never arrived. Kody, meanwhile, was pacing the mansion he had left weeks before. Or, more accurately, the mansion that he had thought would always belong to him and Robyn, now deserted save for the sounds of old arguments. Robyn's stuff was taken away from her by the court, but Kody's pride was taken away even more. He had to stop acting like he was in charge. He was a man of consequence postponed, not a guy of power. In an attempt to calm the maelstrom of guilt and rage he was feeling, he poured a glass of whiskey and took a long sip. Robyn's desperate texts were constantly flashing on the screen of his phone, which was resting on the table. He didn't respond. In his side, every ping felt like a needle. He hated the noise, the truth he hated. Above all, he hated the fact that he had allowed this to occur. Robyn dialed again, oblivious to the coldness on the other end. When she eventually got to him, all she could hear was a long, tense silence followed by the distant, flat sound of Kody's voice. "Robyn, what do you want?" Her throat constricted. She started to say, "Kody, but he interrupted. "No, I'm finished. This is over. I cannot maintain over." "Over? We have children, Kody. We live. You can't just please." He answered fiercely, "I can. The court decided what to do. I'm not siding with anyone. You are on your own." Robyn stifled a scream as her hand shot to her mouth. She sunk to the car seat as her knees gave way. She had lost the man she trusted most, the one who had promised to be true to her. Emotionless, uncompromising, lost. I don't get it," she said. Kody remarked in a chilly, almost whispery voice. "You will understand. This is how things must be. Everything was lost for you. Take care of it." The line then stopped working. Robyn's unrestrained, unfiltered tears filled the car. Her kids clustered near her, scared and bewildered. She had no husband, no home, and no friends. In an instant, the security and comfort she had thought were assured vanished. Although the court's decision was one thing, Kody's tree went deeper than any legal document could ever be. Outside, Meri and Janelle had already begun to consolidate their triumphs. Accounts were being secured, property repossessed, and deeds were being signed. Every document pertaining to the Coyote Pass estate would suddenly be dominated by their names. Knowing that power was not just about winning in court, but also about taking decisive action after the victory, they operated stealthily and methodically. In comparison, Robyn had nothing. She had no one to support her, no plan to save what was left, and no man to defend her as she watched the empire fall apart around her. For the first time in her life, she understood that having no real evidence to support her status as the favored wife meant nothing. And now, Robyn Brown was completely exposed, having lost her home, her money, and her loyalty.